Greetings and welcome. My name is Trevor Thompson, and I'm the director of our St. Francis Office of Justice and Peace. So good to be with you here on this adult catechetical opportunity. As you know, our children are being invited to consider different aspects of our faith tradition each month. This month's topic is the corporal works of mercy. So my hope is in this presentation to provide a little bit more knowledge and background and understanding of what we believe. And of course, my hope is also that it will invite you into a deeper love of Jesus and the church. Certainly more understanding and more love for Christ and the church, I think, will give us greater comfort and confidence as we serve as the primary models of faith and gospel living for our children. So right up front here, I'll tell you that the church traditionally speaks of 7, sometimes 8, sometimes even 9 corporal works of mercy based upon several passages from scripture and how our traditions have evolved over a couple thousand years now. So, there's a painting here, as you can see, from the 16th century that depicts the 7 works of mercy, the corporal works of mercy: feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty, clothing the naked, burying the dead, visiting the sick, visiting the imprisoned, and giving alms to the poor. So remember, at this point in history, in the 16th century, most of the world's population did not read in a literate way as we do today. So paintings like these, as well as stained glass and theatrical dramas and oral storytelling, these were the ways that the teachings of Jesus were shared with others. So I don't know, this painting here is kind of like the 16th century's version of PowerPoint. So speaking of PowerPoint, I'll have a few slides here to keep us looking at stuff here, and hope to offer a few words of reflection around this theme of the corporal works of mercy. Before I kind of talk about those individual acts of mercy, though, I want to talk about the word mercy and our understanding of it in the Judeo-Christian tradition. So Pope Francis is not the first pope to speak, write, or witness to mercy at all. In fact, the last few popes we've had have written and spoken quite a bit about the theme of mercy. But Pope Francis has made no qualms how central this theme is to his understanding of the heart of God and the call of the Christian in the world. When Cardinal Bergoglio, as cardinal, accepted the election of the papacy, he said out loud to the whole world there in some of his first words, he said, "I am a sinner, but I trust in the infinite mercy and patience of our Lord Jesus Christ." And at the Mass, the Sunday after he was named Pope in 2013, maybe you might recall that moment, he delivered a homily where he said, "The message of Jesus is mercy. For me, and I say this with humility, is the Lord's strongest message," he said. In that same homily, he was preaching around the scene in the Gospel of John that speaks about the woman who's caught in adultery, someone whom the scribes and Pharisees are about to stone as prescribed by the law of Moses. And in that scene, Jesus saves this woman's life by calling upon whoever was without sin to cast the first stone. So Pope Francis said in that homily about that scene, he says, sometimes we too like to reproach others, to condemn others. However, Jesus comes for all of us who are broken and downtrodden and unable to see life's or our own goodness and beauty. Rather than judgment, rather than impatience, rather than criticism, rather than brimstone and smite, Jesus looks at this woman and offers the medicine of mercy. Go and sin no more, Jesus says. I love that. Medicine of mercy. In a homily a little later that year, as his focus really zeroed in on this theme of mercy, he preached on 3 parables in the Gospel of Luke that speak to the lost coin, the lost sheep, and the lost son. In that latter familiar parable for us, we hear about the son who squandered all his father's wealth and returns home as the prodigal son. There's a beautiful image there on the right in this scene. And that prodigal son experiences not an angry or an eye for an eye kind of father, but a father of mercy. And Pope Francis says about these parables, this is really beautiful, so bear with me here. He says, Jesus is all mercy. Jesus is all love. He is God made man. Each one of us is that little lost lamb, that coin that was mislaid. Each one of us is that son who has squandered his freedom on false idols, illusions of happiness, and has lost everything. But God does not forget us. The Father never abandons us. He's a patient Father, always waiting for us. He respects our freedom, but he remains faithful forever. And when we come back to him, he welcomes us like children into his house, for he never ceases, not for one instant, to wait for us with love. And his heart rejoices over every child who returns. He is celebrating because he is joy. God has this joy whenever one of us sinners goes to him and asks his forgiveness. The Lord awaits us with patience. He sees us when we are still a long way off and when we're all alone, and he runs to meet us. He embraces us. He kisses us. He forgives us. He throws a party. That's how God is. That's how our Father is. That's God's attitude. Those are just some beautiful words, really touching words. And you really get this sense that Pope Francis really wants us to know that kind of God as we live this Christian life. So you might recall in 2016, Pope Francis designated that whole year to be a year dedicated to mercy. In fact, he called it the Jubilee Year of Mercy. In recent years, he's published a book. Here, this is the title of the book, The Name of God is Mercy, that collects some of his writings and edits them and puts them out for our reading and inspiration. And he's also put out 2 major encyclicals, teaching documents over the last handful of years that flesh out what a life of mercy might look like today in our relationship to the earth and in our relationship to our neighbors, our brothers and sisters in need. So for Pope Francis, again, God's heart is primarily a heart of mercy. And Christ's heart and his entire life was a witness to what that mercy looks like in action. Did Pope Francis make that up? Of course not. Right? And so I just want to say a few words about this theme of mercy. In the Hebrew scriptures, we hear we hear Yahweh described as patient and merciful. We hear the psalmist quite a bit name a God of mercy. Psalm 103 I have here brings to the fore, I think, the grandeur of God's mercy. He says, God forgives all of our sins. He heals all our diseases. He redeems our life from the pit. He crowns us with steadfast love and mercy. Psalm 146, another psalm there, he even more explicitly attests to the concrete signs of his mercy. The psalmist says, God executes justice for the oppressed. He gives food to the hungry. He sets the prisoners free. The Lord opens the eyes of the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are bowed down. The Lord loves the righteous. The Lord watches over the sojourners. The Lord upholds the widow and the orphan. According to Judaism, God, in fact, governs the world with this mercy and has guided all of salvation history in mercy. We hear Psalm 136 narrating the whole history of God's revelation to the Jewish people. And after each verse, we have a little bit of a glimpse at the beginning of that here on the slide, detailing the history of God's salvation. This line is, mercy endures forever. So beautiful. And it makes me think, like, what would it be like to narrate my life through the lens of God's mercy, right? Not through, the lens of my parents' decisions or their bad decisions, good decisions, whatever, or not through the lens of, I don't know, my own sense of hard work, right? But I'm narrating my life through God's providential care and compassion and tenderness and mercy. So something like, born in 1975 through God's mercy, passed through my parents' divorce through God's mercy, got into a big school fight in high school through God's mercy, went to college through God's mercy, wanted to quit school and wondered and despaired about the meaning of life through God's mercy, met my wife, Elizabeth, and somehow she said yes through God's mercy, had 4 children through God's mercy, even when I don't see it, through God's mercy. God's mercy endures forever and ever. Christians also believe in this merciful God, huh? And we believe that God's merciful love has been made visible and tangible in Jesus. His person's nothing but love, we say, a love given freely to others. And we know Jesus in the sense of the gospel stories telling us about all the relationships he formed with people, right? Often breaking even social and religious taboos to make those relationships happen. He approaches others with incredible mercy, and it generates closeness with them, right? Relationships, encounters that out of those encounters, people say that they were healed. They felt validated. They felt included. They say they had new life in this encounter with mercy and love. We hear the gospel stories of Jesus eating with sinners and tax collectors, right? So what the image there at the bottom is. You see him healing the sick. Remember the story of Jesus seeing the crowds of people who followed him, realizing they were tired and exhausted and hungry, and he feeds them, teaches them, and remains with them in mercy. And when moved in all these situations, we hear again Jesus just responding even to the point of death on a cross, right? And even after being humiliated and broken and beaten, somehow he finds it within himself to look upon others and saying, Father, forgive them, right? Mercy, mercy, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. Everything in him speaks of this mercy. Nothing in him is devoid of this compassion. In the New Testament, the Greek word that's often used for this word mercy to describe the mercy and compassion of Jesus is a Greek word, splanchizomai. It's probably wrong, but something like that. But the word translates to mean viscera, guts. And it's related to the Hebrew word for mercy that indicates here, as the photo suggests, the womb of a mother. So in other words, it might be helpful for us to think about mercy as something that is just from the guts, right? From some deep place within us, kind of like that instinctive maternal attachment of one being to another. Right? So when we're moved inwardly, when we feel that love rise up from our depths of our bodies, we sense that. Again, hopefully we've experienced that in a caregiver, in a mother, a father, in a friend, in a grandparent, somebody who has shown that kind of love to us, right? And so what the scriptures are suggesting to us here is that the mercy of God is not an abstract idea. It's concrete. Again, like the love of a mother or father, moved to the very depths of love for their child. It's a visceral kind of love. It gushes forth from us, from the depths, full of tenderness and compassion. Again, I think I have 4 kids, and I think I feel that sense of visceral love for them. We also know that I think in our traditions, love and mercy are understood less as nouns and more as verbs, as actions. And so again, God doesn't just say, I love you in an abstract way, but we understand through Jesus, God shows his love for us, makes it visible, tangible, and continues to be with us in the context of the Eucharist and the sacraments. It's not an abstraction. It's something concrete, intentional. It's a behavior. It's a daily living kind of thing. Again, I think for those of us who are parents or caregivers, we know that saying I love you to our children is important. I hope you say that now and always. But more importantly is our modeling, our showing, our offering that compassion and tender care. Pope Francis says here, we cannot meditate on mercy without turning it into action. I want to turn to a couple parables where I think Jesus fleshes out for us what this love in action looks like. In this story, I know you're familiar with the parable of the Good Samaritans, the story Jesus tells when asked about what it means to love our neighbor. And again, we know that loving our neighbor is one of the 2 commandments, as Jesus says, that we shall follow. Love God with all our heart, mind, and soul, and our neighbor as ourself, right? So Jesus tells this story of a traveler who encounters some robbers, and who strip him of his clothing and beat him and leave him half dead on the road. And then a couple people pass by. The story says that a priest passed by and then a Levite passed by, but both avoid this man beaten on the side of the road. They seem to understand themselves kind of too righteous, right, before God, too spiritually clean, too other for this one that's crying out for help. But finally, a Samaritan comes by to listen to this man, to get down on his knees and feel the brokenness of this man and the struggle that he's experiencing. I'm imagining him talking to him. I'm imagining him asking what happened. I'm imagining him wondering what he could do, right? Helping him. What are his immediate wounds? How might I bind those wounds? And we then hear in the story him taking this man to go get some help and to offering money for his care. And at the end of this parable that Jesus tells, he turns to the experts of the law who are trying to really kind of quiz him about what it means to love neighbor. And he says to these experts of the law, which of these 3 people who passed on the road do you think was a neighbor to the one who fell into the hands of the robbers? Which of these ones? All 3 could have been brothers of mercy. But in fact, only the one who showed mercy was a true brother, right? The Samaritan, this outsider, not the one who's even committed to the law to love God and love neighbor. But the Samaritan is the one that showed mercy. So what would it look like for us to cross that proverbial road of what divides us as brothers and sisters, and to put God's love in action, God's tender love in action towards others? Just as God is merciful, so we're called to be merciful as well. We hear in the Beatitudes, blessed are those who show mercy, for in that they shall experience God's mercy themselves. I want to highlight the second parable. It's an important one, Matthew 25, the latter part of it. Jesus tells a parable, sometimes called the parable of the sheep and the goats. It's a scene of kind of the final judgment. It's put some time, and Jesus, tells this story where the shepherd will separate the sheep from the goats. He'll put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. The sheep will be those who are saved, and the goats will be the unsaved. And the sheep on Jesus' right are blessed by God, it's said, and the reason is that for where I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. And the king will say in this moment of judgment, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers, you did it for me. And the goats, of course, are, what the heck? When did we see you hungry or thirsty or in prison? And Jesus said, I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me. So again, powerful words. And as you could see, that this is actually the gospel passage where we get this traditional list of the corporal works of mercy. That in some ways, this story is a story that suggests the kinds of works that Christians do, the kinds of actions that Jesus, finds important as he shares with us in these kind of final teachings of the Gospel of Matthew. We talk about these as works of mercy. This is how the traditional way the church has described these. There are a list of spiritual works of mercy. We're not going to spend much time on those here, but I think it's just important to understand that wherever there's someone in need, wherever there is a lack, wherever there's a sense that people are feeling lonely, people are on the outside, people are feeling not included, people don't have the basic needs to live a life of dignity as a child of God, there the Christian is, right? So that these lists have emerged almost like the to-do list of a Christian that respond to the kind of basic needs of humanity as we journey through this life together. And I love this line here, that Pope Francis at the bottom, a bit of mercy makes the world less cold and more just. So again, I think it's important as we go through these corporal works of mercy. I'm going to go through each one here. And I think we can think about them as the actions that Christians have done throughout all of church history. We know from the earliest times, even before Christians were normative in the Roman Empire, many said, look how they love each other. Look how they take care of those who are in need in their community. Look how they care for the orphan, right? See how they welcome the vulnerable. See how they care for the sick. See how they bury their dead, right? These are things that the non-Christians weren't doing in the same way. And it was part of their evangelization to the wider world from the very beginning. And it's also the case that without these works of mercy, I think it's hard to understand people like Saint Martin of Tours and his life of giving his cloak to a beggar, and Saint Francis of Assisi, who served and lived with the lepers, right? Or Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, or Saint Vincent de Paul, or Saint Oscar Romero, or Mother Saint Teresa of Calcutta, or Dorothy Day, or Pope Francis. It's hard to understand these people's lives, right? In the sense of, why do they do what they do? Without understanding these lists of the works of mercy. So let's look at our list here. Feed the hungry. And I'm going to have photos in each of these corporal works of mercy that are reflective of the kinds of things that our parish community does in the wider community, right? How we embody this as a parish. But I'm also going to offer a few ideas for how you and your family might put these works of mercy into practice. Certainly, there are many people in our world that go without food. And so much of our food also goes to waste. So we might just in this work of mercy consider how our practices, stewardship practices of our own food habits can benefit others who perhaps don't have those same resources. We have pictures here on the right from Oak City Cares. which is a multi-service center for the homeless population in downtown Raleigh, serves meals on the weekends. A picture there from our Brown Bag Ministry that packs lunches for a senior community in Durham. And we have pictures on the left there from Catholic Parish Outreach, which is the largest food pantry in Wake County that we both support through our donation drives, as well as many volunteers who serve there on a regular basis. So, again, might invite you to think about how are you feeding the hungry? And as with our holidays coming up, Thanksgiving and Christmas, what might it look like to perhaps donate to a Thanksgiving or Christmas donation drive, or provide a meal for a family? Maybe it might be helpful to research or identify or contribute financially to one of these organizations that serve the hungry. Perhaps there's somebody in your own neighborhood who has going through a transition, or could use a frozen casserole to put on their table during this week or this month. So many ways. Giving drink to the thirsty here. Many of our brothers and sisters in our world, and I think we're fairly blessed here in our own country to have a clean, accessible water, although there are many in our world who do not. We have a sister parish in Guatemala, and they have communal wells, but it's a challenge. And through droughts around our world, available and clean water is not always accessible. So what might it look like in our community, in our world, to give drink to the thirsty? This picture on the left is a picture from our migrant ministry. During the summertime, we travel to various farm camps where migrant workers who are here seasonally labor in our fields, and we bring them drink. We also bring them to Mass at Our Lady of Rosary in Lewisburg, North Carolina. So again, I think water is something that most of us take for granted. We turn on the faucet and it comes, but certainly there are ways that we can donate money to build wells around the world. Perhaps also there's a way that for, I don't know, your neighborhood, your family, a sports team, gathering bottled water and making a distribution to perhaps migrant ministry or to another homeless community that might live in the woods here in Wake County. Certainly we all could be more conscious to not waste water. It's a gift. We know from our brother St. Francis of Assisi that water is our sister, and so we might also just be conscious of it is as a natural resource. Sheltering the homeless. There are many circumstances that lead to someone becoming a person without a home. And I've spent some time with folks who are homeless, and sometimes it's the most random things. Certainly there are some who are, we might say, choosing to be homeless, but there are many who, for a variety of circumstances, are looking for shelter, are looking for a home. And I think in Wake County, it's becoming increasingly difficult with the lack of affordable housing opportunities, apartments, units, that it's difficult here. So again, everybody's deserving of a home. And so we do our darndest here at St. Francis to make that happen for folks. The picture on the right is our family that we sponsored from the Congo, a refugee family, helping them kind of acclimate here and set up their apartment, and walked with them for their first year of living in this country after living in a refugee camp for over 20 years. A few times a year, we host for 1 week homeless families as part of the ministry of Family Promise. And so this picture there in the middle is our Clare Hall that really turns into a homeless shelter for that week. We provide meals and overnight accommodations for these families who are transitioning out of homelessness, looking to get jobs so that they can move into an apartment that often Family Promise will help them set them up with. So it's a beautiful ministry. Certainly, I think Habitat for Humanity is a well-known ministry all over the world, and we've been with them here in Wake County, as well in different parts of Central America, helping build houses for people. And our ministry, St. Vincent de Paul, it's a ministry here at St. Francis that provides emergency assistance to families who are um, having a challenge to pay their monthly bills. We visit them, spend time with them, kind of assess the situation, and we try to prevent them from being homeless. And so our own parishioners are going 2 by 2 out into the community. So again, you might just want to think about, whether it's donating time, whether it's donating money to organizations that help build homes or provide shelter for people. There's also millions of people in our world who are on the move, fleeing from war and illness and hunger and impossible living conditions, looking for safety and peace. And so we might kind of wonder about our heart moving in compassion and mercy to others. Thinking about visiting the sick. Here at St. Francis, we have within our own community many who are sick, who are often forgotten or avoided because of their sickness. In spite of that, these individuals still have so much to offer us, and they're our brothers and sisters. And so in many different ways, from visiting folks at the hospital, to doing blood drives, to providing casseroles and other meals to families who are going through transition in our Feed the Need ministry, to visiting people at our assisted living facilities around here. We are walking with them, accompanying them, loving them as our brothers and sisters. Certainly during this pandemic time, many of us are praying for those who are sick, and we've also, some of us have been doing grocery shopping or caring for them as we can. Many of us certainly are doing our darndest to wear masks and be as conscious as we can as we move around in public spaces. And it's another, again, work of mercy we're doing on behalf of the sick. So again, you might think about participating in one of these ministries, but certainly even in your own neighborhood, I imagine there are elderly, those who are in need. It so often is the case that our neighborhoods are cold and not very neighborly, and so we might just kind of think about who's in need right there, right now, that we can reach out to. Visiting the prisoners. People in prison are our brothers and sisters, children of God, made in the image and likeness of God. No matter what someone has done, they deserve the opportunity to live, to have what they need to live a life worthy of their dignity. That's part of our call as Christians. It's part of our understanding of God's dignity. That's not something, anything we could do could be taken away. And so we have had through our parish many ministries, opportunities to be in solidarity with those behind bars. We have a prison pen pal ministry where we exchange letters with those on death row in Central Prison. A number of parishioners have participated in an annual tradition of singing Christmas carols on Christmas morning outside of Central Prison, which is in downtown Raleigh. We've had parishioners who've been involved in retreat ministry called Kairos that have gone into prisons to provide faith retreats for men and women to share God's word and the message of God's love and mercy. We also have a parishioner now exploring a restorative justice program to be able to go into the prison and to help invite folks in the women's prison to better understand and perhaps reconcile their own heart with God's mercy, and perhaps extend that mercy to others as well as they look to transition out of prison. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. Another work of mercy is burying the dead. And so certainly through our funeral ministry, it is something that we attend very closely to. We have a columbarium on our campus where we really care for the remains and provide a special memorial for loved ones to remember the dead. We have a grief share ministry for those who are still among the living but holding on to their loved one and are looking to be walked with and accompanied as they find a sense of God's presence and God's love and mercy during this time. And we also have a ministry called Stephen Ministry. It's a one-on-one listening ministry where we extend the love and mercy of Jesus to others who are going through some kind of transition. Could be the loss of a loved one, but it could be any transition. So I just highlighted and lifted it up here. Certainly, writing a card, this I suppose comes to mind when I think about visiting the sick, certainly with visiting the prisoner, and now with burying the dead. Perhaps someone who's recently lost a loved one, and maybe you want to make a card and send a prayer and send your thoughts. Perhaps you want to visit a cemetery and just kind of maybe someone that is a part of your family that is there, but perhaps it's just also again, so many go without prayers, and so just being present there, kind of lifting up the needs of these family members at this time. Give alms to the poor. I put here this pie chart of an old annual report pie chart of ours here at the parish, and perhaps you can see there that one of the slices of the pie is tithe to peace and justice. So we do this in many ways here at St. Francis in terms of giving alms to the poor, but I just do want to highlight that one of the commitments St. Francis has made is to give 10% of the parish offertory to support justice and peace ministries, and to be given away to organizations and services that provide mercy to the poor. That's something that's stewarded out of the office that I direct. I have a committee of parishioners that help provide stewardship to that tithe. But it's a noble commitment. It has been said that the budget is a reflection of our deepest morals and our deepest values, and so we want at St. Francis to think that's an important piece of how we embody the gospel of love and mercy and compassion. The picture on the right here is a picture of a woman in Central America that is connected to one of our fair trade vendors. You might recall that every year around this time of the year, we do a market here at St. Francis, and we invite a variety of vendors who sell fair trade and alternative products. And the vision behind that is that we give an opportunity for parishioners to shop according to their values. So shop at these vendors who are working with craftspeople in a variety of countries and villages directly, and they are helping these villages and these men and women keep their traditional crafts going. We're providing a livable wage through our purchase of their items for these individuals. We're giving them future opportunities to invest and to grow their business or to transition to different businesses. And we're helping them often care for creation, care for the environment of where they're living. So I put that there because I think it's kind of another way that we can be conscious or think about giving alms to the poor. We often buy on the cheap, not often conscious or aware of all of the people and the practices that are involved in the product that we're buying. So what would it look like, perhaps, as we think about our purchases, to be more intentional about what we buy and think about what fair labor might look like in that context. But I'd also, of course, encourage you to be very intentional about the charities that you might give to. Certainly happy to share with you the list of charities that we as a parish are making donations to. But I know many families, they I know we talk about fasting or kind of a rice bowl or a jar for charity in the home during Lent, but that might even be something that's just all the time. How do we invite our children to understand that as money comes in, that we are stewards and we are blessed in many ways, many times over, more than others have been blessed in their life. So the giving alms is a way that just kind of names our advantages and perhaps even the privileges that we've had that have been given to us, opened up for us, and out of mercy we share with others. So certainly as our society, faces different challenges and circumstances, Pope Francis has said it might be helpful to think about creating new forms of mercy, new works of mercy, new expressions of the way mercy looks in our world today. And so when Pope Francis wrote one of his major teaching documents in 2015, he put forward the idea of adding another work of mercy to the traditional 7, which is this one, care for God's creation. That we might think about contemplating God's creation and performing daily gestures that help to build a more sustainable and more beautiful world for future generations. So he made this statement on the World Day of Prayer for the care of creation. And he said, how might we show mercy to our common home? Really beautiful statement. So he invited us to examine our conscience and acknowledging what might be our contribution to ecological devastation and finding a firm resolve to live and act differently. Here at St. Francis, we have a community garden now that's 10, maybe 10 plus years old. And we donate all the food that's grown there to charity, to Plant a Row for the Hungry, as part of our partnership with Interfaith Food Shuttle. But it's a beautiful gathering of parishioners who on Saturday morning tend the garden, plant beautiful things, and grow food for others. We've also recently, maybe you heard, put up solar panels on one of our buildings, again, making a commitment to think about other ways to procure our energy that power our buildings. So just might invite you to think about how that might figure in your life, right? I don't know what planting a garden might look like for you, or going out to the local watershed or creek or lake and doing a cleanup with your family, or learning about native pollinators. We hear a lot about pollinators being threatened. So what would it look like to plant some native plants that would create a habitat for wildlife? What would it look like to, I don't know, go to a farmer's market once a week and meet a farmer and procure some vegetables from that place. Often at farmers markets, they have a place where you can donate, buy something and then donate some vegetables. Fresh vegetables go a long way in communities of need. And certainly I would invite you to be more intentional, maybe wondering, being curious about where the energy comes from for your home, for your cars, and maybe be more intentional about your transportation and your home energy use. All right, let me transition out of talking about the concrete acts, and I just want to have a few slides here. One is to talk about mercy not as individual acts, but as a lifestyle. And it's something I think Pope Francis has spoken quite a bit about. In one document, he says, our culture today calls for a new lifestyle. And, I have this quote here: a simple lifestyle is good for us, helping us to better share with those in need. So I wonder, what would it look like not to consider the works of mercy as individual acts on a to-do list, and somehow the rest of our lives go on as normal, but we can just do these individual acts. Because I really think that the deeper call for us all is not to think about them as acts, but as just our whole life, right? And anything that tends to care for the life of another is a work of mercy, right? So whenever we see neighbors in need and we feel that deep sense of visceral compassion welling up inside of us and we respond, that's a work of mercy. Right? That's a work of mercy. So what would it look like to adopt compassion and mercy as a lifestyle? Um, and I think we see in Pope Francis, kind of again, one way that lifestyle has been modeled. We see glimpses of him online and in the news, washing feet of prisoners and visiting soup kitchens, tenderly touching the face of children who have Down syndrome or otherwise. We see also, practices that he decisively made, like things like driving in a smaller car, or living in simpler quarters, or foregoing the luxurious papal vacation spot for more modest options. In fact, he actually opened up that vacation home in Italy for other use, for public use, to come and view the gardens during the summer months rather than him using it himself. We see him speaking quite frequently about the plight of refugees and immigrants, right? And the injustices of racial inequalities, and the call to protect the unborn and the elderly. So for Pope Francis, this life of mercy, it's not something that, again, is partitioned, but it's comprehensive. It's his whole life. It's all aspects of living, thinking, and feeling in his case. And again, I think that's how we understand our God, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to take a Sabbath or take a vacation from being merciful, or I'm feeling too distracted at this point, or too busy to be merciful, right? And again, I know that's God and that's what Jesus models for us, but we're invited to be merciful as our Heavenly Father is merciful. Pope Francis says that living a life of mercy should challenge us, this is a quote here, to eliminate every form of closed-mindedness, disrespect, discrimination, patronizing judgment, selfishness, indifference, poverty, and abuse and violence. It's quite a list, right? But I think, again, we're conscious of all the ways that our world is cold and broken. And what would it look like for us as people of faith, people who believe in this God of mercy, people who know it and touched by it in our own hearts, if we went out into the world as salt and light, as that warm heart of mercy? Okay. What else do I want to say here? Pope Francis, I found another spot where he talked about, I'll just put this out here too, the idea of educating our children as a work of mercy. And I think about right now, many of us in our homes are educating our children in our own homes. What would it look like to think about that as a work of mercy? What else do I have here? Yeah, and maybe just more broadly, all the ways that marriage and parenting, family life, acts of friendship, caregiving, all of these are daily, mercy-making crucibles. That's my language there, daily mercy-making crucibles, right? Those are sometimes where we spend most of our lives, in our families, in our marriages, with our children, with friends, in our workplaces. So what would mercy look like in those places? I feel like there's not a day, or sometimes an hour, it seems like, where I'm not challenged to kind of hold one of my kids who's crying, right? Stubbed her toe, threatened by a sibling, right? What am I look like to listen, to connect before I come in with a sense of judgment or anger or annoyance, right? In the context of my marriage, right? What does it look like to come home and offer a hug and a how's it going? Wow, that seems hard, rather than a comment that may sound critical about the state of the home, or what's for dinner. What would a posture of mercy look like to a sibling who has a different political perspective than we have? What about the grudge that we've been holding for years, unable to make that phone call to talk to a friend about our conflict, right? What does mercy look like in those contexts? What does mercy look like in a pandemic as we move about into the public? here on a regular basis. I want to say just a quick word about social justice as a work of mercy. It's another frequent thing that Pope Francis speaks about, and we hear in Scripture that mercy and justice go together, and that without justice, there's no peace. I think we know from experience, and I think you've heard that saying where it's wiser to teach someone to fish than to give them a fish. Well, I think in this work, we also know that there are many systems in place in our society that have made it difficult for some people to even get access to the lake where the fish are. And so when we begin to live this life of mercy, I think we start spending more and more time with people in need, with people who are experiencing hunger and people who are struggling to find home or who've been evicted for an unjust reason. We spend time with those in prison. We hear people who are fleeing their lives for safety, seeking better opportunity. So as we hear their stories and we feel our guts wrenched, right? That we feel it in that kind of viscera of our bodies. We feel connected as a brother and a sister to these individuals. With them, we begin to dream naturally of better systems to be put into place so that more people might have better opportunities for a life of dignity. For all of God's children, again, what does a just world look like? So in this way, mercy as social justice, I think, could be something like, I don't know, writing a letter to a legislator, encouraging them to be creative and intentional about finding more plots of land to build affordable housing units in our county. Or maybe in this time, it's going to a school board meeting and exploring how our schools might serve the more vulnerable parts of town in equitable ways. Or maybe it's protesting certain policies that don't reflect our Catholic values of mercy and justice for all God's children, all God's people. I love these images here because they're children who are speaking out for justice. Sometimes they still have this sense of idealism that we sometimes are too busy or too calloused or cynical to believe in. And I think we belong to a church that just continues to dream of God's beloved community, as Martin Luther King Jr. spoke about. And so again, mercy as justice. So in conclusion, the Word of God teaches us that it's more blessed to give than to receive. And we hear in St. John, the first letter of St. John, where it's written, let us love one another because love is of God. Everyone who loves is begotten by God and knows God. Whoever is without love does not know God, for God is love. And in this love, not that we have loved God, but that he has loved us and has sent his Son as reparation for our sins. And so, beloved, if God loved us in this way, we must love one another. Friends, thanks for letting me share with you today. In God's love, I love you all. Be love for one another. And I hope to see you sometime doing works of mercy, works of love and compassion for your neighbors in need. Be well. Bye-bye.